What if a single presidential announcement could shake the foundation of the American auto industry? Moments ago, former President Donald Trump announced a huge amount of tariff on goods from Mexico, throwing Ford and General Motors into turmoil. Billions in losses, halted production lines, and thousands of jobs now hang in the balance. These automakers, already navigating the high-stakes transition to electric vehicles, face growing accusations of betraying their American roots by outsourcing jobs and chasing global profits. The stakes are higher than ever. How will this reshape vehicle prices and disrupt supply chains? What does it mean for struggling communities dependent on manufacturing? Most importantly, how will it impact your wallet and the future of American innovation? Buckle up, this fight is just getting started. What's happening? News alerts lit up screens across the country, cutting through quiet factory shifts and busy homes. Former President Donald Trump announced a bold threat aimed directly at two of America's most iconic automakers, Ford and General Motors. His proposal? A sweeping 25% tariff on goods crossing the border into the United States. For an industry already walking a tightrope between global supply chains and domestic production, the implications were immediate and profound. In factories from Michigan to Kentucky, workers exchanged nervous glances, wondering how this would affect their jobs. On Wall Street, analysts raced to calculate the potential fallout for stock prices and market stability, and consumers are questioning whether their next car purchase might suddenly cost thousands more. This was not just about tariffs, it was a move that struck at the heart of an industry central to the American economy and identity. But how will it reshape the delicate balance of global manufacturing? What will happen to car prices, American jobs, and local economies tied to the industry? This is not just an industry story, it is a national conversation with stakes that touch every driveway and every community. How did we get here? To understand the magnitude of Trump's threat, consider the numbers. A 25% tariff on imported goods could send shockwaves through the industry, raising the price of vehicles assembled with overseas components by thousands of dollars. Economists predicted that consumers might face an increase of up to $5,000 on some car models, a staggering figure for families already stretched thin. The potential fallout extended beyond sticker prices. Ford and General Motors, companies that together employ hundreds of thousands of workers, could face billions in losses. Supply chains, meticulously optimized over decades, could crumble under the strain of sudden cost increases. Factories relying on just-in-time delivery systems might find themselves unable to keep up with production demands, leading to delays, layoffs, and empty dealership lots. But it was not just the numbers that painted a grim picture. The threat came at a time when Ford and General Motors were already navigating turbulent waters. Both companies had committed billions to transitioning from traditional gas-powered vehicles to electric alternatives, a shift fraught with challenges. While the electric vehicle market represented the future, its profitability remained uncertain. Tariffs threatened to pile additional costs onto an already precarious transformation. Meanwhile, competitors like Tesla, with its vertically integrated production model, seemed poised to capitalize on any misstep. Unlike Ford and General Motors, Tesla's operations relied far less on overseas components, giving the company a distinct advantage in a tariff-heavy environment. Foreign automakers like Toyota and Hyundai, with established operations in countries unaffected by US tariffs, could also step in to fill any gaps. The tension between Buy American ideals and the realities of global manufacturing became stark, exposing the vulnerabilities in the industry's current structure. For everyday consumers, the implications hit close to home. Higher production costs would translate into higher monthly car payments, increased insurance rates, and potentially fewer financing options. The auto industry's struggles could spill over into local economies, affecting small businesses and suppliers that depend on healthy manufacturing hubs. The stakes extended far beyond the boardrooms of Detroit, touching the lives of millions of Americans. Digging into the root causes. Why had Ford and General Motors found themselves in such a vulnerable position? The answers lay in three interconnected factors: outsourcing, the push for electric vehicles, and the broader political climate. First, outsourcing had become a cornerstone of the automotive industry. For decades, companies like Ford and General Motors shifted production overseas to reduce costs. Countries like Mexico and China offered cheaper labor and more flexible supply chains, enabling automakers to stay competitive in a cutthroat market. This strategy, while effective on paper, came at a cost. Domestic jobs were lost, communities reliant on factory work were hollowed out, and the automakers' Made in America image suffered. Second, the shift to electric vehicles introduced a new layer of complexity. Producing electric vehicles required access to specialized components, particularly batteries, which were often sourced from countries with strongholds in rare earth materials. The transition represented a high-stakes gamble for Ford and General Motors. While electric vehicles promised long-term growth, they required massive upfront investments and posed immediate challenges in profitability. Finally, the political climate played a critical role. Donald Trump's America First agenda placed immense pressure on companies to repatriate jobs and invest in domestic manufacturing. Trade imbalances and the outsourcing of production became lightning rods for criticism, with automakers frequently finding themselves at the center of the storm. Trump's tariffs were not just about economics, they were a statement about national identity and economic sovereignty. These factors combined to create a perfect storm. Ford and General Motors found themselves balancing the need to innovate with the imperative to remain competitive, all while navigating the volatile terrain of global politics. For the average American, this meant uncertainty about the cost of living, job stability, and even environmental progress. Behind closed doors. While the public debated the merits and pitfalls of tariffs, the corporate headquarters of Ford and General Motors became battlegrounds of their own. Behind closed doors, executives scrambled to assess the potential fallout. What would tariffs mean for their production schedules, profit margins, and long-term strategies? Could they negotiate exemptions, or would they need to overhaul their supply chains entirely? The stakes were nothing short of existential. In boardrooms, the mood was tense. Leaders weighed the pros and cons of public responses, knowing that every statement carried the risk of further inflaming tensions. Public relations teams crafted carefully worded messages, aiming to reassure stakeholders while avoiding direct conflict with the Trump administration. The balance was delicate, and the margin for error razor thin. Meanwhile, the reactions from workers, unions, and local communities were immediate and emotional. In towns reliant on automotive plants, fears of layoffs loomed large. Union leaders spoke out, demanding that companies protect American jobs while calling for government support to ease the transition. For workers who had spent decades building engines or assembling vehicles, the threat of plant closures felt deeply personal. The media frenzy added another layer of complexity. Headlines painted the conflict in bold strokes, framing it as a showdown between corporate greed and patriotic duty. Social media amplified voices on all sides, from critics of outsourcing to defenders of free market economics. Public sentiment became a volatile force, capable of swaying stock prices and shaping corporate strategies. For consumers, the noise could feel overwhelming, but the underlying question remained clear. What would this mean for their wallets, their communities, and their options at the dealership? The answers were far from simple, but one thing was certain: the automotive industry and the people who depended on it stood at a crossroads. Historical perspective: the relationship between the American government and its automotive giants has always been a story of both conflict and collaboration. Consider the oil crisis of the 1970s, a pivotal moment in American history. Fuel prices skyrocketed as oil supplies from the Middle East were disrupted, sending shockwaves through the auto industry. American automakers, accustomed to producing large, fuel-guzzling vehicles, found themselves ill-prepared for a sudden consumer demand for smaller, more fuel-efficient cars. It was a wake-up call that underscored the dangers of being out of sync with global economic realities. Fast forward to the Great Recession in 2008, when the automotive industry teetered on the brink of collapse. General Motors and Chrysler faced insolvency, while Ford narrowly avoided bankruptcy. Federal bailouts totaling tens of billions of dollars saved these companies from ruin, but not without significant strings attached. The government demanded structural reforms, greater accountability, and a pivot toward more sustainable production practices. These moments in history highlight a recurring theme. Automakers must constantly adapt to external pressures, whether they stem from economic shifts, geopolitical crises, or governmental policies. The present-day clash between Donald Trump's proposed tariffs and the strategies of Ford and General Motors mirrors these past challenges. Just as in the 1970s, when fuel efficiency became a national concern, today's focus has shifted to electric vehicles and domestic manufacturing. The stakes are strikingly similar: economic survival, consumer trust, and the livelihoods of thousands. But the question remains: have Ford and General Motors learned from the past, or are they repeating the same mistakes in a new guise? For viewers, this context reveals how the dynamics of global trade and domestic policy can impact not only corporations, but also the people who depend on them. Ford and General Motors, different paths. Ford Motor Company and General Motors have adopted divergent strategies in the face of unprecedented industry challenges, and their paths reveal much about their leadership and vision for the future. Ford's bold move with the F-150 Lightning, the electric version of its iconic pickup truck, represents a calculated risk. The F-150 has long been a symbol of American resilience, dominating the bestseller lists for decades. By electrifying this flagship model, Ford is betting on brand loyalty and a growing appetite for sustainable alternatives. However, this strategy is fraught with challenges, from securing affordable batteries to building a robust charging infrastructure. General Motors, on the other hand, has committed to a more comprehensive transformation. It plans to phase out all internal combustion engine vehicles by the year 2035, a dramatic pivot that signals its ambition to lead the global shift toward electric mobility. Its Ultium platform, designed to underpin a wide range of electric models, exemplifies this commitment. But such a sweeping change comes with its own risks, including potential alienation of loyal customers who are not yet ready to embrace electric vehicles. Leadership styles also play a critical role in shaping these strategies. Ford's CEO, Jim Farley, has positioned the company as a pragmatic innovator, focusing on leveraging its existing strengths while cautiously expanding into new territory. In contrast, General Motors' CEO, Mary Barra, has taken a more aggressive approach, framing the company as a trailblazer willing to make bold sacrifices for long-term gains. These leadership differences not only shape the company's paths, but also influence the options available to consumers. For viewers, these strategies mean more than corporate competition. They directly affect the vehicles you will see on the market, their prices, and the infrastructure supporting them. Whether you are considering an electric truck or debating the cost-benefit of owning a zero-emission vehicle, the choices Ford and General Motors make today will ripple through the marketplace and into your garage. The Tesla effect. Tesla Incorporated has become synonymous with electric vehicles, and its influence on the automotive industry cannot be overstated. The company has not only captured the lion's share of the electric vehicle market, but also redefined consumer expectations. With groundbreaking battery technology, a vast network of superchargers, and a brand image that screams innovation, Tesla has set the benchmark that legacy automakers are now racing to meet. Tesla's dominance has created a cascade of challenges for Ford and General Motors. While both companies have invested heavily in electric vehicles, they are playing catch-up in a game where Tesla is the clear leader. The California-based company's vertical integration strategy, producing many of its components in-house, has allowed it to sidestep some of the supply chain issues that plague its competitors. Meanwhile, Ford and General Motors remain dependent on third-party suppliers for key materials like batteries, leaving them vulnerable to delays and price fluctuations. Tesla's success has also reshaped the competitive landscape. Its ability to command premium pricing while maintaining strong consumer demand underscores the importance of brand loyalty and perceived value. Ford and General Motors, with their decades of legacy, must now convince consumers that they too can offer cutting-edge technology without compromising reliability or affordability. For the average consumer, Tesla's impact extends beyond its vehicles. Its innovations have accelerated the adoption of electric vehicles industry-wide, driving competitors to innovate faster and potentially lowering costs over time. However, if Tesla's lead widens too much, it risks creating a monopoly-like dominance that could limit options for buyers. The stakes are high not just for Ford and General Motors, but for anyone who values competition and diversity in the automotive market. Current market metrics. Understanding the current market for electric vehicles provides a window into the challenges and opportunities faced by Ford and General Motors. Electric vehicle adoption rates are rising steadily, with global sales expected to surpass 10 million units this year. In the United States, however, electric vehicles still account for less than 10% of total vehicle sales, highlighting the gap between aspiration and reality. Consumer sentiment toward electric vehicles is a mixed bag. While many appreciate the environmental benefits and lower long-term operating costs, concerns about high upfront prices, limited charging infrastructure, and range anxiety persist. These factors weigh heavily on Ford and General Motors as they navigate the transition from internal combustion engines to electric drivetrains. Financially, both companies face significant hurdles. Ford recently reported increased costs tied to its electric vehicle production, citing supply chain disruptions and raw material shortages. General Motors, while showing promise with its Ultium platform, is grappling with similar issues, compounded by the enormous capital required to retool factories and retrain workers. The threat of new tariffs only adds to this precarious equation. A 25% tariff on goods imported from Mexico could inflate costs across the board, from raw materials to finished vehicles. In a worst-case scenario, these tariffs could push vehicle prices beyond what the average American household can afford, potentially stalling the adoption of electric vehicles. For consumers, these numbers are not just statistics. They translate to real-world impacts. A slower transition to electric vehicles could mean fewer choices, higher prices, and delayed infrastructure development. Conversely, if Ford and General Motors can overcome these hurdles, they could pave the way for a more accessible and sustainable future in transportation. Policy and regulation pressures. The policies shaping the automotive industry in the United States are as complex as they are divisive. Federal tax credits for electric vehicle buyers provide significant incentives, encouraging consumers to adopt greener transportation options. These credits have been instrumental in making electric vehicles, once seen as a luxury, more accessible to the average buyer. However, these same policies impose strict regulatory burdens on older gasoline-powered vehicles, requiring automakers to meet stringent emission standards. For traditional manufacturers like Ford and General Motors, this dual dynamic of incentivization and regulation creates a challenging balancing act. Former President Donald Trump's critique of these policies underscores the tension. Trump has publicly argued that these regulations unfairly favor newer players like Tesla, which primarily focus on electric vehicles, while imposing hefty costs on legacy automakers trying to navigate the transition. His contention is that these policies disrupt the free market, forcing companies to divert resources from profitable ventures to comply with government mandates. But are these policies truly unfair, or are they a necessary step in the fight against climate change and the push for innovation? State-level mandates add another layer of complexity. California, for instance, has introduced some of the nation's most aggressive electric vehicle adoption targets, aiming for a future where new gasoline-powered car sales are entirely phased out. States like Texas and Florida, however, remain more lenient, prioritizing consumer choice over strict environmental mandates. This patchwork of regulations forces automakers to adapt strategies based on geographic markets, leading to inconsistencies in product availability and pricing. For the consumer, these policy shifts have tangible effects. Tax credits may lower the initial cost of an electric vehicle, but stricter emission standards could increase the price of traditional gasoline-powered cars. Additionally, the divergence in state policies means that buyers in California might have access to incentives and infrastructure that their counterparts in less regulated states do not. These disparities highlight how government action directly influences car buying options, making it imperative for consumers to stay informed. Automation and its impact on jobs. Automation is rapidly transforming the landscape of automotive manufacturing, and its effects are felt deeply on factory floors across America. Robots and advanced machinery are increasingly taking over tasks once performed by skilled human hands, streamlining production processes and cutting costs for automakers. This shift allows companies to produce vehicles more quickly and with greater precision, a critical advantage in a competitive market. However, this efficiency comes at a human cost. Thousands of factory workers have already been displaced as automation eliminates roles that once formed the backbone of manufacturing. For workers with decades of experience assembling engines or welding chassis, the transition to automated systems feels like a betrayal. Some automakers have introduced retraining programs aiming to help displaced workers transition to roles in maintenance or programming for automated systems. Yet these efforts often fall short, leaving significant gaps in workforce readiness. The impact of automation is not confined to factory workers. Entire communities that rely on auto manufacturing face economic uncertainty as job losses ripple through local economies. Businesses that once thrived on the spending power of factory employees, restaurants, retail stores, and service providers must grapple with reduced foot traffic and declining revenues. For many towns, the shift to automation has turned once vibrant manufacturing hubs into shadowed reminders of their former prosperity. For consumers, automation presents a paradox. On one hand, the increased efficiency and lower production costs could eventually lead to more affordable cars. On the other, the societal costs of widespread job displacement could lead to broader economic instability, affecting everyone. Understanding this trade-off is crucial as automation continues to reshape the industry. The outsourcing dilemma. The global nature of automotive manufacturing is both a strength and a weakness. Outsourcing production, particularly for critical components like electric vehicle batteries, allows automakers to lower costs and maintain competitive pricing. Countries like China and South Korea, with established supply chains, advanced technologies, and lower labor costs, are attractive hubs for sourcing these materials. For companies like Ford and General Motors, outsourcing is often a matter of survival in an industry where profit margins are razor thin. Yet, outsourcing comes with significant political and social baggage. Critics argue that reliance on foreign manufacturing undermines domestic job creation and economic stability. For American workers, the sight of factories shuttered and jobs shipped overseas feels like an abandonment of the communities that built these iconic brands. Political leaders, including Donald Trump, have seized on this sentiment, framing outsourcing as unpatriotic and calling for policies that penalize companies for moving production abroad. This issue resonates across political lines, reflecting broader concerns about economic nationalism and the erosion of middle-class opportunities. This tension is not just political, it is deeply personal for many consumers. Calls for boycotts against brands perceived as abandoning American workers have gained traction. Social media campaigns highlight the contrast between slogans like "Built Ford Tough" and the reality of assembly lines operating in foreign countries. For some buyers, the origin of a vehicle's components can be a deciding factor in their purchasing decision. This emotional connection between consumers and domestically produced goods underscores the symbolic power of American-made products. At the same time, outsourcing offers undeniable benefits. Lower production costs translate to more affordable vehicles, making cutting-edge technology accessible to a broader audience. This affordability drives innovation and encourages adoption of electric vehicles and other advanced technologies. However, this reliance on foreign manufacturing poses risks. Geopolitical tensions, trade restrictions, or natural disasters can disrupt supply chains, delaying production and driving up costs. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted just how vulnerable global supply chains can be, leading automakers to reconsider the balance between cost efficiency and resilience. For the average consumer, the outsourcing debate boils down to a choice. Support domestically produced vehicles at a potentially higher cost or benefit from the lower prices that outsourcing provides. This dilemma underscores the interconnectedness of global economics and individual purchasing decisions. Ultimately, the balance between affordability and national economic priorities will continue to shape the future of the automotive industry and the choices available to consumers. Crisis or opportunity? The auto industry stands at a crossroads. On one hand, the proposed 25% tariffs could drastically reshape the economic and operational landscape for Ford and General Motors. If these tariffs go into effect, the ripple effects will touch nearly every corner of the market. Vehicle prices would rise significantly as the cost of importing parts and materials skyrockets, forcing automakers to pass those expenses on to consumers. For the average buyer, this could mean thousands of additional dollars for a new car, pushing affordability further out of reach. Meanwhile, factories reliant on global supply chains may face reduced production volumes, leading to layoffs and economic distress in communities that depend on these jobs. International relations would not escape unscathed either. Trade partners, including Mexico and China, could retaliate with their own tariffs, creating a tit-for-tat economic conflict that could disrupt supply chains and strain diplomatic ties. For Ford and General Motors, the stakes are monumental. They could either adjust to a world where costs spiral or risk losing market share to competitors less reliant on imports. However, there is also the possibility of negotiation and compromise, which might offer a lifeline. Policymakers could implement phased or reduced tariffs, providing automakers with the time and flexibility to adjust their strategies. By incentivizing domestic production, the government could encourage automakers to establish or expand facilities in the United States, creating jobs while maintaining competitive prices. Such a middle ground could avert an all-out economic crisis while paving the way for a revitalized manufacturing sector. Why does this matter to you? Whether you are a car buyer concerned about affordability or someone living in a town whose economy depends on factory jobs, the decisions made in Washington will have far-reaching consequences. The future of vehicle pricing, employment opportunities, and even your local community's economic health hinges on how this situation unfolds. But the story does not end with tariffs and negotiations. The potential for innovation to rewrite the rules entirely remains a powerful counterweight to this turmoil. Imagine if new breakthroughs in battery technology allowed for affordable and domestically sourced components, reducing reliance on imports and mitigating the impact of trade restrictions. Ford and General Motors, by leveraging partnerships with government agencies and tech innovators, could accelerate this shift. Such collaborations could spur advancements in manufacturing processes, like three-dimensional printing, that reduce costs and streamline production. These innovations could transform how vehicles are made, turning a moment of crisis into an era of renewed strength. This innovation-driven path matters to you because it is not just about cars. It is about reshaping energy systems, creating new industries, and ensuring a future where manufacturing thrives without sacrificing affordability or quality. The choices made today will define the vehicles you drive, the energy that powers your home, and the jobs available in your local economy. The choices made by automakers and policymakers today will shape the economy, jobs, and communities of tomorrow. It is about more than just cars. It is about innovation, fairness, and the future we want to build. That is why we constantly make videos like this. So if you value these insights, subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments.